Minister, President, distinguished guests, friends of the ERC, heartily welcome to Bergen on what we believe is going to be a sunny day. On behalf of the University of Bergen and the Research Council of Norway, it's my great privilege to guide you through these upcoming hours, dedicated to what we all love, excellent research. My name is Alette Gillus Mykkeltvedt, and I'm the Research Director here at the University. Today's event will be streamed and recorded, and this will be available afterwards as well. I will now give the stage to our host, Professor Margaret Hagen. She is the Rector of the University of Bergen. She will be followed afterwards by the man who brought the ERC Scientific Council to Bergen. That is Øystein Jansen, and he is the professor at the university and also vice president of the ERC. So welcome to the stage, Margaret.
Dear Minister and esteemed guests from the ERC, friends and colleagues, it's a great pleasure for me to welcome the Scientific Council and the President of the European Research Council to the wonderful University of Bergen. I am so happy that you have chosen Norway as the venue for your strategic gathering today and this year. This is actually the second time the ERC has had these kind of meetings in Norway. The last time was 10 years ago in Oslo. So it was about time that you arrived to Bergen. Norway is, as you know, the home of many researchers and research groups who are conducting fundamental research inquiry, fundamental scientific inquiry. And here you will find academic communities who have found both interest and success in ERC across all disciplines. And a knowledge sector that is eager to get to know you better and to learn. Therefore, I am also very much happy that the Minister of Research, the Norwegian Research Council, and rectors, researchers and staff from the Norwegian research community have joined us today. We all know that these weeks before summer holiday are very busy. Warm welcome to you all. I would like to also to take this occasion to say something on the effect of ERC on our kind of university. The University of Bergen have experienced that the ERC projects can do quite a lot for our academic community. This university has been awarded ERC funding for a total of 50 projects up to now, 1/4 of all Norwegian ERC grants. Receiving these grants has a great significance for the careers and the research activities of the individual researchers involved, something that we will hear more about later today. But more than this, these grants impact the broader academic community in their institutions. And these grants are spread across a wide variety of scientific fields and disciplines. And more than this, the ERC grants appreciate the sheer quality of ideas, of research ideas. They are of a great value to the host institution. Our analysis gives us good reason to believe that our success in ERC grants have led to a significant improvement in the quality of research, increasing our research activity, international recruitment, and competitiveness. An analysis of the 783 publications currently associated with our 50 ERC projects show that our research and researchers are becoming far more visible internationally. And results from these projects are published in stronger journals and they receive more citations. The generous budgets of the grants, from 1.5 million for starting grants up to 10 million shared between several institutions in synergy grants, enable researchers to establish their own research groups with fellows and postdocs to realize their own research ideas. Our 50 grants, as a conservative estimate, we say that these funds have made it possible to recruit at least 100 young researchers. This contributes to making us an attractive university, as the ERC projects attract young and established researchers from all over the world. And furthermore, our analysis also shows that researchers who have carried out ERC-funded projects get excellent opportunities to obtain new research grants from both EU and nationally funded schemes. ERC is about curiosity-driven research that deal with how do things work, how do they begin. A lot of questions that are essential also to being human. Research not only constrained by current thinking, by how we think today. Research that asks us to step outside our comfort zone. Research that is not necessary for tomorrow, this day, or the next year, but maybe for the next 10 years, 20 years, and even for the next century. It will have unexpected payoff also in a lot of different fields than from the field of the project. Without curiosity-driven research, so much of our technology would not exist today. Without curiosity-driven research, much of our medicine, our treatments would not be today. I am therefore, and for several other reasons, very excited to spend the coming day, this day, with all of you gathered here. And I look so much forward to all our conversations, both on and off stage. And let us not forget this: basic fundamental research are and is essential to being human. Thank you very much, and heartily welcome to the University of Bergen.
Dear Minister, Research Council Director, rectors, and colleagues of the ERC Scientific Council and the ERC Executive Agency, and colleagues who have come here who are interested in the ERC. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you to Bergen and its university. When I suggested to the ERC Scientific Council that we meet in Bergen in June this year, I promised nice weather for the event. And I'm proud to say that we have managed to live up to the promises made. Of course, this is hard work. I hope our gathering here for a strategy retreat for the ERC Scientific Council will give us the best surroundings for important discussions on the future directions of the ERC. So for the future of ERC, you will see probably a nice outcome of having been here. I'm grateful that we can have this seminar to discuss research policies in pursuit of excellence and learn from our Norwegian grantees about what an ERC project does to science and to the careers of excellent researchers. I wish to thank Margaret, our rector, for enthusiastically hosting us here, and the dedicated UIB staff who have helped organize all our meetings and events, down to the detail it takes to ensure successful outcomes. And I'm also pleased that our Minister and Director of the Research Council have found this a nice opportunity to come to Bergen. And that I'm grateful that you've set aside time both for the seminar, dinner, and policy meetings today. I hope this will be engaging and inspiring also for your work. In times when Europe needs to step up its emphasis on research as a key element in securing Europe's role in the world, in terms of providing more innovations in society and in technologies, knowledge to solve global challenges and secure democracy, excellent research using the imagination and talent of the best minds in Europe is particularly important. It has been said that the creation of the ERC is the best European innovation of recent times. So, which I think I subscribe to that view if you look at all that comes out of it. Yet we could fund at least 40% more projects without reducing the quality criteria for our selection of projects. So let's use this opportunity to underscore the importance of excellent research and work together to create an even stronger ERC in the next 7-year framework program for research. So welcome to Bergen, everyone.
In the next session, you can look forward to what I hope will be an inspiring discussion about the role of excellent research in Norway and in Europe. I'm delighted to welcome a very competent panel to the stage, and to lead us safely through this, I will give the floor to Torsten Persson. He is a member of the ERC Scientific Council, and he is also a research professor at the University of Stockholm. Please come to the stage. You can sit here. You can sit. Maria can sit here. Yeah. And Margaret is here. Yeah.
Well, good morning, and welcome to this panel, which is indeed a very qualified panel. We have the rector that you just heard, Margaret Hagen, Oddbjørn Hoel, the Minister for Research and Higher Education, Maria Leptin, the ERC President, and Marie Sundli Tveit, the Executive Chair of the Norwegian Research Council. But we also have a professor of Italian language, of literature, and history, microbiology, and of spatial planning. So both, administrative and academic backbone to our discussions. So let us not waste any more time. I've circulated a few questions to the members of the panel beforehand. They are grouped under frontier research and research funding. And for full disclosure, here are the questions that I posed on frontier research. What are the best arguments for basic curiosity-driven research? How much should we prioritize frontier research? That's the question that applies to Europe. And we'll discuss Framework Program 10 later on. And it also applies to Norway, Norway's national policies and priorities. So you don't have to cover everything. Just take your pick and give a minute introduction. Please, Margaret.
Thank you. Huge questions when it comes to why should we prioritize basic research? There are so many reasons for that, but I believe that the main reason is that we should be prepared for tomorrow. We don't know what we will need tomorrow. We can't foresee the situations, the crisis, our needs tomorrow. We can't so we need this knowledge base. We need the preparedness. we are presently living through a lot of different crises, geopolitical, biodiversity, climate, democracy, etc. But you know, we will not know about the crisis and what we will need tomorrow, and we will not even know the huge discoveries of tomorrow. And also, I would also like to put forward also the importance of the to keep alive and to preserve and cultivate the big variety of different scientific disciplines, because it is also through the combination of basic research within those disciplines that most of our solutions in the unforeseen challenges tomorrow will appear. So that is, and then I could have talked about the competitiveness of Europe and of being human and all these arguments, but I'm sure that our minister will put forward those economical reasons.
Oddmund?
Yeah, well, I could have talked about the research view on this topic, but I think I'm the politician on the scene, and maybe the only politician in this room. So I'm here as a politician, of course. We in Norwegian research policy, I think it's not very unlike the research policy in a lot of European countries. That's now in our long-term plan. A main goal is to put research into use in a better way than we do today, and that's I think a different view from what is the main focus on this seminar. So therefore, I will say we need bottom-up research because it's useful. It's because we need it to solve the societal problems, to solve the problems we don't know exist in some years, to get some answers on the question we did not know to ask. That's why we need the bottom-up research. And my most important thing to say here is that that is useful for society and for politicians.
Very good. Maria, what's your take?
Well, I do have to respond to that, don't I?
Yeah.
Margaret has, but actually, before I do say, yes, absolutely, we need the fundamental research to deal with the problems that we don't even know we'll have next year. The COVID epidemic was the clearest case where we had done the research that allowed us to make a vaccine, even though we didn't know beforehand that we would need this vaccine. But before I go on further in that vein, I do want to say that we need research also as a cultural value. And I say that here in Norway, in this beautiful environment, in this rich country. I mean, it's amazing to come into this building and see how beautifully Norway supports its culture just by the environment, using that money and that wealth. Curiosity-driven research is a fundamental human activity that we all care about. We care about that 3% DNA from Neanderthals in our body that has nothing to do with curing cancer. We care about ancient languages and where our languages come from. That doesn't help us to deal with societal problems. We care about the black hole that was published a few years ago. Again, that does not help us deal with climate change. So we really care about it. And I think a rich and cultured nation like Norway can't and shouldn't just say we only do research because it's useful. So I'm just putting a spanner in the works here. I agree with the need for doing fundamental research, but it also needs to be done in areas where we can't, not only do we not know the questions we should be asking, we also shouldn't care about it, and we don't know what it'll be, you know, whether the field will even be useful for it. So I think there's just no predictive power, and we should pursue fundamental research as a cultural activity. For example, AI now. I mean, I understand there's a big competition for using AI. Well, you know, where is the talent that you need for that on the ground? AI has been pursued in universities for 50 years. At a time when, you know, we thought, oh my God, these stupid mathematicians. No, they're not stupid, of course. They're mega clever. But what they're doing is so ivory tower. Computer sciences, you know, algorithms. This was considered totally useless knowledge. And look what it's done. So let's keep that in mind, that if we don't have the ground to nurture in a very, very broad way the useful research that we don't quite understand yet, we're not even going to get there.
Marie.
Well, I'm preaching to the gallery here. I know that's what you guys want to hear, but I deeply believe it as well.
Yeah. Well, I think the question's already been answered very well, and there are different perspectives to it, of course. I strongly believe that providing that opportunity for curiosity to be at the steering wheel, that you can do within the ERC, and also the long-term perspective that it provides for. It is absolutely fundamental for all kinds of reasons, and use is one of them, sort of future use is one of them, but it's also to be able to pursue all the thinkable questions that we have. And I think history shows that one day, one way or the other, it will come to use. And I think the questions that you mentioned about the black hole and the ancient languages, and I think I'm pretty sure that will be useful in some societal challenge in the future, and maybe even the ones that we have now. But I think the bottom-up, the curiosity-driven, the only excellence spaces in research funding is very, very often also where the research frontier is fundamentally moved forward. It's where the groundbreaking stuff comes from. It's where the radical innovations come from. So that's something that we can discuss. How do we accelerate from that in the future programs? I think it's also, and this is something that I'm very fundamentally engaged with as an idea and notion, and I think something that researchers know everything about, and that is serendipity. You know, finding something that you're not looking for, and then being able to pursue it straight away. That's what these programs can help us do, and it's also a value, a fundamental value. It's research for its own good and its own development, and it's also, I think, deeply, deeply useful, and something that to solve societal challenges, fundamentally, I think you should put all the money in there, really. It would be more efficient, probably. Yeah.
Very good.
That was just a little political touch there.
I was going to mention the word serendipity, but you did it. Okay, so any disagreements or additions that I was guessing?
No disagreements, of course. I totally agree what is said from the others. But as I said, I'm the politician, but I can add something to Maria's view on the cultural side. It's also about democracy. It's about having a liberal democracy. Then free research and academic freedom is, of course, very needed. Without that, we can't have a democracy. So that's also a very important part of Norwegian research policy, of course. But then I read your very good speech, the 7th of May speech, Maria, when you argue for more money to the bottom-up research. And there you use most of your speech to argue that this is useful for society. And I totally agree with that
Yes.
too. Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously, I agree with that too. It is useful, and but what I like to do is to remind ourselves, you know, and also it is immediately easy, you know, radio or COVID vaccines. But the thing is that so we emphasize the questions, the actual breakthrough science that comes from this. But I think we have to go a level deeper, namely the academic pursuit. You know, I was asked yesterday by Chrono in an interview, careers have become so precarious, and why should young people even go into research careers anymore? They should not go into research careers to create the next ChatGPT. Some may do, that's great. My own sons are engineers and they like tackling problems like that, except they've both stopped doing it, they've gone into elsewhere. But you need this rich layer of academic pursuit for the sake of academic pursuit. And so that's harder to explain. It's easy to explain to an audience like this. They applaud it, they know it themselves, they're in it for that themselves. But, you know, so yes, that argument that I made in that speech is easier to make than the one about the very broad and very deep need for fostering academic research for its own sake.
Yeah. And
yeah, perhaps what's missing is the word unexpectedly useful, right? That's the difference between the two of you. But Margaret,
I think that it is, I think actually, I believe, this is, maybe I shouldn't say that we agree, basically. But I think the opposition between useful and unuseful is something that I don't think that unuseful, useless knowledge exists. Maybe what exists is that we don't see the use of it here and now, but we know that it will be useful somewhere down the line, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in Bergen, but I mean the accumulation of knowledge is useful. All kind of knowledge is useful, and all kind of knowledge fields are also useful. So what we are talking about here is also academic freedom, and whether all science should be directed by political choices. I mean, or the questions that are asked in terms of our current crisis and needs, etc. And so, as mature civilization, which I hope that we are somehow, should preserve this space for searching for the unknown, for the free search of knowledge, because that's how we develop further. My main point was that this dichotomy between useful and unuseful, maybe it's of no use to us.
I think that, I mean, this is a discussion that can go on. You know, is it potentially useful, or is it useful, or is it for its own good? Or you can discuss it from all kinds of angles for probably for a million years, and the question will still exist. But I think it's fundamentally also a funder's logic to sort of separate them in a way. And it's necessary because we need to safeguard the spaces where you don't have to explain beforehand what it can be used for. Although a lot of the people that are getting funds from the ERC or from FriPro, for example, within the Norwegian system, they know exactly what they're pursuing of challenges or of, you know, concrete stuff that they want to solve. But still, even though you can already say something about that, it's very important not to ask about it, because we are creating, there's a danger that you then lock the idea in, that you sort of close the door a little bit for the serendipity, or you create that path dependency towards a narrower use than what it potentially has. So I think it's a fundamental value to keep it as open as possible anyway, in order to also make any kind of use possible. So, yeah.
Yeah, Maria.
Yeah, so I think I disagree about all knowledge is potentially useful. I can think of stuff that's unlikely ever to be useful, and that shouldn't matter. But I think there's another important point here that we haven't touched upon at all, that there are, so the ERC, of course, only funds a tiny sliver of research that is done in Europe. And it can and must therefore be extremely selective. And sometimes, you know, I hear in our panels, who are wonderful at trying to identify that very top level of talking about sort of incremental research. So I think that's the excellence versus the not so excellence we haven't discussed here. And there I actually want to defend the incremental research. It's extremely important to do boring research as well. It's only on that fundament of boring research, confirmatory research, you know, exploratory in small areas, that the big stuff can be built. So, but I think we haven't touched upon that difference between what some call excellent. Boring research can also be excellent. If it's not done in a good way, it really is useless. So that's where quality enters into uselessness. And I think politicians have a duty to make sure that the knowledge that has been created by this idealistic view that we've been espousing here, that is used. And I think it is very important to allocate a good chunk of funds. My claim is no single country, no country can do that without also nurturing the other, let's call it currently useless stuff, at a high quality.
You get the last word on this.
The last, yeah, maybe I just the first thing I said to that. I totally agree with you that to fund the bottom-up research is important because some of it maybe in the future would be useful, but of course a lot of it would not be. That's and that. But the big job that you have and all of you have is to convince politicians like me, or not like me, but all the others, I'm convinced, that this is that this is useful. It is important for the future of our society. It's about the competitiveness of Europe in the global competition. It's about that. It's about solving the very big challenges that the world face, and therefore we need you. That's and that we all have to do that job, because politicians like me stands every day in a question about prioritizing the military forces, health. Unemployment in some countries, tax reduction, transport, everything. We have to have the best arguments.
Very good. So I think we have slid more or less into the second topic of research funding. So it's a question about both how much to spend, whether it's the European Union or it's a national budget, and of course it's how to direct it. This is a particularly topical issue right now, since we are discussing the framework program 10, FP10, as the jargon goes, which will be the successor of Horizon Europe, and for 7 years. And the ERC Council has published a document where we argue that the research support in Europe should go up from just below 100 billion over the last 7 years to double that amount. But then, of course, within, even if that happened, the question is how to spend that money, and the bottom-up versus the top-down research is an issue. And from the outside, Norway seems a country that has more top-down research than bottom-up research. But I know you have slightly different opinion on that, and I'll let you develop that. And then, since we're also talking about FP10, you know, Norway doesn't have a vote, but it definitely has a say on and can make some inputs into the framework program and its design. And what's your take going to be on that? And I even added, is there a prospective Nordic coalition arguing in favor of high amount of research spending and you know, a particular kind of research spending? So take your pick. Maybe we can go the other way this time. Marie first.
Yes, thank you. So I don't try to answer all of them at once. I'll get the word back. Right. So to start with the double FP10 support to 200 billion euros. Yes, and then I will also admit to being the president of Science Europe at the same time while I'm sitting here. So that would be, I think, unanimously from the member organizations throughout Europe that a double of the framework program would be beneficial for all the reasons that we've already said, and to be able to, you know, to have competitiveness to solve the challenges for the future of Europe. That is a very strong advice. So I think that one's quite easy to stand behind. It might be harder to actually get it. And when it comes to what share it should be, at least the share it has now, I would say. And then we can go into discussing how this actually looks in the Norwegian setting and how we work groundbreaking research in Norway. Of course, in the Research Council, we have completely open, quality-only arenas. It's called FriPro. Yes, it's a smaller share of the total than what we see in the European system. I have to immediately say that, and I'm sure that the ministry is going to say something about how universities are funded and things like that. But I'll just talk about the competitive funding. I must also say that I think it's extremely, as I said, extremely important to have a solely bottom-up share, and we also advocate for that to be larger. That said, we also try to cater for as much curiosity drive as you can get by keeping the other arenas open, so that, and also even sometimes go in and finance things from the open pile within the thematic programs, so that it's not, I mean, it's not necessarily sort of very, very relevance driven in the other ones as well. But yeah, I think it's a constant discussion. It's a constant sort of, there is a trade-off, and I'm looking forward to hearing what the others say about the proportion in the Norwegian system.
Yeah. Okay, very brief. Why doubling? I cannot speak for why doubling. I can only use for the general framework program. We're talking 200 billion for the overall framework program, so everything included. I use the examples from the ERC. Our grants have not grown over the 17 years. We still have the same grant levels as we did when we started. No inflation adjustment, so they've been losing. We need double only for that. And Øystein has already mentioned that we can only fund 60% of those projects that are ranked as A and must be funded. So we're losing out. Europe is losing out. That's for why doubling. There are good reasons for why doubling. Elsewhere throughout Europe, the GDP, 3% GDP aim hasn't been reached. We're lagging way behind what European politicians like to consider our competitors, US and China. So there's, I mean, the 200 billion is mega easy to defend. Is it realistic? When I first said this number, apparently I said it here in an interview 2 years ago. I didn't realize that I was even talking about it then here, but a journalist reminded me yesterday. So of course it was sort of, you know, a pipe dream, and I just threw up that number. Now it is being said by, you know, by all sorts of academic associations, academies, university associations, rectors, etc. So everybody's saying it. Well, still, they would say that, wouldn't they? They're the ones who receive the funding. But the very top level advisors to the EU, whether they're advising on competitiveness or the internal market, whether it's Letta or Draghi, I mean, you know, heart and blood politicians, they're saying it. So I think there is a recognition that we can't go on thinking funding agriculture is the most important thing that Europe can do, but that the value of research for Europe is being recognized. So maybe it's realistic. Proportion, again, that will be for the European Commission to decide, not me. It'll of course be for the Council to look into this and for the Parliament ultimately to approve. We get only 17%, 17% of the total budget. And you know what? And here we get back to usefulness, and I do use this argument shamelessly. The number of patents that come out of the research that's done on ERC funding is higher than the rest of the framework program. The startups that come out of the ERC the number is huge. The most successful applicants to the EIC, to innovation funding, are those who've been funded by the ERC before. So, you know, that 17% does more for Europe than the rest. So why should it only be 17%? Anyway, that's not for me to decide.
I just want to remind you that you said this about agriculture in a country which, like Switzerland, didn't enter the EU because they don't support agriculture enough. So
That was
anyway,
one of the reasons.
yeah, I'm sure you have a slightly different opinion on this matter.
Politician from the agrarian party, I of course support that research very strongly. But
research, anytime. I'm talking about subsidies.
Yeah, well, but oh yeah, we also need that. But we also need to subsidize research, and that's. I read your, and I think that also was in your speech, Europe on the 20 fields of research. Europe is on the top in international publications, only in 2 of them. I think that was biology. Mm-hmm. And historical studies. Yes. So that's history is of course very important, but it's not the only thing you can build a future on. So it's something has to be done. In our preliminary input to the next framework program, we have emphasized that the budget of the ERC should be strengthened. Well, we can discuss doubling. I think Norway will support that. But I think the job there is not how to use more money, but how to get the European government and parliaments to double the budget. That's the job. That's the big job. In a situation where the university budgets are being taken down. So we have some big challenges there. I think in Norway we need this. Of course, we need to defend those competitive funding arenas in the Research Council. This FRIPRO, the Center of Excellence. And together with the money we send to the ERC, I think we use about some more than 200 million euros each year on that. And that is, and in addition to that, we have, I think, one of the internationally best high share of basic funding of the universities. So we also have we also fund the bottom-up research through the basic funding in the universities. And compared to a lot of the other countries, I think we are much higher in that field. So we have to see the total when we are discussing the Norwegian funding of the bottom-up research.
Thank you, Margaret.
I would like to start off to remind ourselves that there is this European campaign going on which is Research Matters. And our university is among the initiative takers for this campaign. So just to mention that and to encourage everyone to speak out for increased funding for both for ERC and for the next framework program. Hugely important. Of course, I support increased and doubling the funding for the next framework program. It's difficult for me to say exact what should be the percentage of ERC in this next program. But what I would like to stress is the Norway and Norwegian situation. We have a very particular situation in Norway. We have just one research council that covers it all. Advice, they do advice, they do evaluation, and of course also they deal with all the calls. And the way the Research Council is structured now, I believe it's somehow, I hope that within not too long, that we can evaluate it and that we can have a look at it once again to see whether it preserves free research sufficiently. Free basic research. So I am very much in favor of the European 3 pillars. And that's something that we don't have in Norway because, we have a different system has been chosen. So I think that's something to at least follow up and evaluate within not too long in order to really make sure that basic free pro and free research is possible also to a certain extent in Norway. And what else to say? Look to China in this because they're really investing. Some days ago I read this huge feature article in New Economist on how China is doing when it comes to basic research also, and it's something that we should not ignore, and we should step up as the European continent should really step up and invest in research, and we can also look to USA. And I would also, as a university rector, I would also once again stress how important ERC and free basic research and investment in free basic research is to our kind of institutions, because these are institutions when all our education is research-based. And we have this continuous dialogue between the old ones and our students. And the fruitfulness and the creativity that goes on in this research-based education is something that is so important, and it's so hugely important that the younger generation also experience this excellent international research, and that they also experience, of course, academic freedom and freedom of research. So that's something that we should, the quality that ERC brings in to enables us to perceive as a university is something that I cannot stress too much.
Very good. Time is running out, so but I'll give you each a round of reactions on this as well. Maybe also, given what Oddmund said about political feasibility, this business about a Nordic pact to drive home a common point. If you can comment on that, please.
Yes, I'd like to do that. I'll just follow quickly up on what Margaret was saying about the governance structure in Forskningsrådet, in the Research Council, which I obviously, any governance structure that we will ever have, I will make sure, as long as I am there, I'll make sure that it caters perfectly for curiosity-driven research in the way that any governance structure can. But we will safeguard it and we will evaluate it. So you don't. I'll just assure the audience that our eyes are on that always, and also not only curiosity-driven research, but also looking at the balance between different disciplines, for example, which I think is the biggest change since last time. So yes. When it comes to, I already referred to my engagement in Science Europe, so that would be the sort of the totality of the or not the totality, but a large amount of the European funders and also performers that will be in Science Europe and that will be advocating for this. And I'm sure we're going to have conversations about how that can be done very efficiently and in ways that can fly politically, because I think that's also paramount. Sometimes we do have to put it in ways that can be of importance to politicians, that if we want to have our way, and we do. So that I think that's also very important. And so, yeah, I will be using that European arena, but also I have constant dialogue with all the sister organizations in all the Nordic countries, also outside of Science Europe. So we meet regularly, several times a year, and this is obviously one of the things that we are discussing. So whether we're going to sort of write down a specific Nordic one, if that's one-to-one with what comes from Science Europe, that remains to be seen. But we will be using our voices, I think, nationally, regionally, and also in the European setting.
Okay, so maybe I'll give the two of you a chance to react to that also.
Well, I think it's we are working on a white paper on the research system, which we will finish next spring. And I think, but one of the good thing in Norway is we have 1-year budget, but we also have a very stable society, a stable political system. It's not very big shifts when the government shifts. So it's, I think we will continue with one research council. We will not divide it into more parts. We are 5 million people. I think it's enough with one research council when we think about the bureaucracy and so on, and to see all this feel together. But of course, how we make the instruments to work in the best way and prioritize between bottom-up and top-down and so on, that's a question. And all what Margaret is saying, we are taking also that is also into consideration. But I think on the European level, we have read with interest the Danish position in the new in the discussion. So we are exploring how we can have a common Nordic view in the process in the European discussion. And we are outside the EU. The other Nordic countries are inside. We are discussing with Great Britain, with Switzerland, and so on. So we are participating very strongly, and our aim is to strengthen the ERC budget, really.
No, compliments to the government for supporting ERC and also for putting forward an increase in the ERC budget and in the next framework program in the position paper from Norway. So that's hugely important, and I just would like to encourage you to keep the voice strong in that regard.
Maria, last words of wisdom.
Well, I mean, I'm on the listening end of this part of the conversation, but I have to say a common position of the Scandinavian countries, of the Nordic countries, would be amazing. I mean, you guys probably don't know how much the world, well, you must know, always looks to Scandinavia as the poster child for getting everything right. And I think a joint position would, on research, and in particular on fundamental research and the proportion that goes to the ERC, would be amazingly useful. We will need the member states and allies to have a strong position on that. So we'd be extremely grateful. And I hear with optimism what you've just said. So thank you for that.
Very good. So we're out of time, and I want to not attempt to summarize. I just want to thank the panelists for their enlightening and almost philosophical remarks. But you know, this room inspires one to think about such things. Thank you very much. Join me in a hand.
I think the discussions about usefulness or uselessness in research will continue afterwards. But now to the next session. Some of us are probably wondering what the future will look like. We are fortunate that we have found 3 wise men that are going to tell us. They will share their insights on upcoming trends and developments. So let me introduce the vice presidents of the ERC. First out will be Professor Gerd Gigerenser, Vice President for Social Sciences and Humanities. Then we have Eystein Jansen, Vice President for Physical Sciences and Engineering. And finally, we will have Jesper Sveistrup, Vice President for Life Sciences. Welcome to the stage.
How should digital markets and organizations function, and how can we prevent the next financial crisis? How should we deal with migration, social diversity, and climate change? And how does the human brain that runs on 20 watts only create thoughts, arts, and innovation? The ERC research on social sciences and humanities spans an enormous amount of questions. And I just learned that the social sciences and humanities are on the upfront in Norway. So about half of all grants are in that area. Congratulations. And I would like to add to the discussion that we just had the following. Yes, funding science can help us to solve the current problems that we face, such as migration, climate change. And I mean with funding curiosity-driven science. And second, as we heard, there's more. Namely, funding curiosity-driven science prepares us to get knowledge that we might use in the future. And the future is something that is always a surprise. But I would add something third. Scientific thinking in general has an enormous potential for our society to get more critical thinking, a more empirical attitude towards evidence, and also can lead us into the once envisioned enlightenment where people dare to know. And it's a vaccine against all kinds of tendencies that provide us with fake news, with mere opinions, and try to influence us. So there's a third goal. It is featuring science can be the cement of democracy. In the few minutes I have, I will just turn to two areas in the social sciences which have this potential, and both illustrate the mixture between things that are relevant in terms of technology and things that are just curious, that we want to know, and maybe sometimes may apply or maybe not. The first is AI. Now, the key question is, how will humans interact with AI in the future? How does AI change us, our own thinking? And you see this the moment we will leave this room, how it has changed us all. Most of us will be scrolling. There are a few questions that I just mentioned that bother me, and where research is desperately needed. First, what can we do against the tendency that more and more people are no longer able to distinguish between facts and mere opinion, between facts and fake news? And the technology makes it always more difficult. And we need to do something against this. And it's again an issue about the cement of democracy. Second, how will digital technology influence the elections? We have had that with the Brexit. We have had that with Trump's win in 2016. And we will face this year in various countries attempts to manipulate elections that have technologies that most of us are not aware of. And we do not exactly know how successful these technologies have been in the past. And it's very important to find out in order to have countermeasures. The third point is we have more and more black boxes that determine our personal life, like credit scores, that also determine all kinds of societies, like this social scoring program in China. How can we help people to understand better how these algorithms function that determine more and more of our lives? And the last thing on AI I mention here is how does AI affect the minds of our minds and also the minds of the coming generations, and has already affected a generation set. A number of studies show that Generation Z, so born 1995 and later, self-reported depression and loneliness has gone up, has doubled or tripled since 2010. That's the market. The iPhone was 2007, and 2010, 50% of American teenagers had iPhones. So the data are about the US. And the Centers for Disease Control give more hard data that emergency room visits for self-harm have also doubled, and suicides among girls aged 10 to 14. How we deal with this problem. And research is desperately needed to do this. And the other issue I just mentioned is the change in another field, archaeology. So the ERC has not only funded over 1,000 programs in AI, but over 200 archaeological projects, and these have contributed not only to new discovery but also has been a key factor in the 21st century radical transformation of archaeology to an immensely interdisciplinary technology. So let me finish. I want to stress the importance of social sciences and humanities, not only in terms of economic or technological development, but also in terms of providing a significant value in supporting the development of the social fabric in Europe: health, community, identity, diversity. The social sciences and humanities have and will provide an inspiration and awe, giving meaning and beauty to life. Thank you for your attention.
This will be a slightly different approach. It will also, to some extent, touch on the situation in Norway in terms of my area, physical sciences and engineering, since there are many representatives of the Norwegian research community here. So my job as a vice president, people ask, what does a vice president do? Why can't the president do everything? And that's one of the reasons to have a vice president. That's one of them. But it's to coordinate the physical science and engineering domain of the ERC and represent. But the main task is to ensure the quality of our evaluation process by being responsible for recruiting top experts from all over the world, so that we can live up to the trust our applicants have in the ERC, regardless of the outcome of the evaluation. I think that's the single most important aspect of why ERC has succeeded, lies in the evaluation, the rigor of the evaluations. In recent years, we've seen a slight decline in the proposals sent to us from the physical sciences and engineering communities. Success rates have been relatively stable, but apparently there's a reducing demand for ERC, slightly going down in some fields. And we are analyzing that a lot, and discussions we are having here in Bergen will work on this, so that we ensure the relevance of the ERC to our particular science communities and their needs. We are also continuously analyzing our project portfolio, and from that we can document that when you give the freedom to our best scientists to pursue their ideas, it creates, and Maria gave you the numbers in the discussion right now. When you do that, you give more value for money than from many top-down approaches. For policies such as the energy transformation, the green shift, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, preserve biodiversity, and not least as a fundament for the digital Europe. So one example is, as many others have pointed to, is the increasing role of AI in our projects. And we just made a report showing that over the years the ERC has functioned, there's been AI included in projects from day one, but it's increasing, and now it's sort of the most common technique used by projects in our field. And so the ERC has been fundamental and engine behind the evolution of these new technologies. But the ERC also caters for interdisciplinary approaches to discuss the societal aspects of this revolution. And we will have the first discussion we will have the day after tomorrow is on interdisciplinarity, because we have a feeling that this is an issue where we can do better and do more. So while Norway is a solid recipient of ERC grants, we lag behind our Nordic neighbors, particularly in physical sciences and engineering and life sciences. All our, in total numbers, all our neighboring countries in the Nordics have a higher number of grants than we have, compared to per capita. Denmark is way above Norway, but also Sweden and Finland are clearly doing better. But I think in Norway there is a tendency to overestimate how difficult it is to be successful in ERC, and not least overestimate what you must already have done to succeed. So my message is, if you have a good idea, there is no better place to go. So it's the idea that counts, and I'm sure that there are lots of ideas in our physical sciences and engineering communities that should be and could be sent to the ERC. About 40% of the funding in ERC, and we fund by demand, goes to the physical science and engineering domain. So it's the largest proportion of what the ERC does. And the two other domains share the rest about equally, about 30% each. Yet in Norway, as also has been pointed out, the situation is an outlier. Physical sciences and engineering is 32%. Life sciences is only 24%. Social sciences and humanities is the largest at 44%. So our communities are different, and I wouldn't say that it's wrong that we have this balance. It shows that we are very, very good research communities in some areas, but it's very uneven. So we should strive higher. Also, for the national success rate is not too good. And I think we have the talent and national funding base to achieve more, even though we can, of course, discuss the national funding base. But I think if you compare across the Nordics, we should clearly achieve more. The only part in our portfolio where Norway excels is in Earth system science, encompassing earth science and climate research. Same is also true here in Bergen. There's a spread, but I will particularly encourage more applications within physics and chemistry. We are scoring very weakly in those areas. So I think these communities are too modest and should be more on the offensive. And I encourage the leaders of our universities who are here to really look after this. Because I'm sure there are lots of ideas that are floating around in the groups and communities. So with this, I look forward to hearing from our grantees later about their experiences, and encourage everybody to use the mingling lunch to interact with our physical science and engineering domain scientific council members who are sitting here and are eager to get to know what's going on here in Norway. Thank you.
All right. Dear Minister, Bergen luminaries, ERC colleagues, grantees, and supporters, first of all, it's great to be back in Norway. I used to come here every year for a while as a child, but it's been years since I've been here, I'm afraid. And last time, I certainly did not know that I'd come back here as a wise man. For me, as the third vice president to speak, The challenge I knew from the beginning was to say something that hasn't been said already. That's not so easy, and we certainly didn't coordinate what we would say. So I'm going to talk about football. No, more seriously, I want to say a few words about a very important reason why ERC matters so much on the international science scene. And I'm going to say a few words about something that hasn't really been mentioning, and that's the importance of competition. ERC is not just about the access to funding. Instead, it's about being part of the interactions, collaborations and workflows across the European nations, and about drawing on the outstanding expertise from so many different countries to identify the best research projects. It's all about competition. During the European Championship that's going on right now, and sorry Norway is not there, but at least you can support Denmark. It's also easy to understand the allure of the ERC. While it's nice that one's national team wins a match once in a while, what football players, and the fans as well for that matter, want more than anything else is to win the European Championship, or the World Cup for that matter. These tournaments allow us to learn from and be measured against the very best, directly and to the eyes of the world. This in turn definitely increases the standard of the European leagues and of the national leagues as well, and this goes straight to science. It's no different there. Only by learning from and measuring yourself against the very best can you reach your full potential. And that means being an integral part of the international science community, which is what the ERC provides. ERC provides a real stamp of excellence. You made it on the big stage if you get an ERC grant. It really matters. It matters also locally, as you've also heard indicated by the minister, the luminaries from the university, and Einstein. People know what the ERC is and what it means to be funded by us. So if you have a great idea for a research project, please do apply to the ERC. There appears to be this misconception, and not least in life sciences, which is even worse off in terms of the number of researchers that dare to apply to us than in the PE domain, that it's only worth applying if you have a crazy good track record. This is simply not true. We want our research to be excellent, of course, but we first and foremost look at the quality of the science of the applicant. This is really important. We have outstanding panels to judge that. I think that's the real strength of the ERC. The panels are outstanding. They know what good science is when they see it. And therefore, if you're measured by a panel like that and you get a grant, you really have made it. Also, even if you don't get the grant, you will still be measured. You will still know where you stand. You will still know what needs to be improved in order to make it next time. Indeed, nobody ever gets an ERC grant the first time. I shouldn't say never, but it's actually rare. You need to apply several times. You need to improve, just like your science needs to improve. So this is one of the main strengths of the ERC, and also a good reason to apply, that measurement. It's actually really helpful to apply in any case. It is really worth your time, so please do apply. Give it a shot. Forget about the Yanda law. You can do it. Thank you.
The three wise men gave us 3 advice. The 1, get a better national football team. Point 2, watch out for AI. And 3, be less modest. So now it's time for a break. 15 minutes, be back 11:35, and you can find coffee 1 floor down.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you could now please take your seats, we'll continue with today's programme. Welcome back from the break, everyone. My name is Katie Anders, and I work at the Division of Research and Innovation here at the University of Bergen, where I am the local contact for ERC grants and grantees. We're now going to follow on from our discussion of current trends and developments in research to meet some of the many scholars working at the coalface of frontiers research here in Norway today. The researchers we'll hear from in this session work at institutions that span the length of the country and cover the breadth of academic disciplines. But they are united by their intellectual curiosity and their drive to push the frontiers of research forward in their respective fields. Each of them has, in recent years, received an ERC grant to pursue this aim. Our guest researchers will offer us an insight into their work and reflect on how their ERC grants have shaped their intellectual agendas and influenced their personal and professional journeys. We'll begin now with our first speaker, who became ERC grantee number 10,000 back in December 2020. Here to present her ERC project is the director of the Centre for Modelling of Coupled Subsurface Dynamics here at the University of Bergen. Please welcome Professor Ingeborg.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I put up the title of my ERC project, so it's called Mathematical and Numerical Modeling of Process-Structure Interaction in Fractured Geothermal Systems. And for the first part of my talk, my plan is just to basically explain this title, and then I will say a little bit more about the impact the project has had on my career after. So we can start with a sketch of a geothermal system in Iceland. So in Iceland, they produce power and heat from geothermal systems in the subsurface, typically from wells down to a couple of kilometers. And they need to drill both production wells to produce the hot water and steam, and injection wells to get rid of the cooled produced formation water and get it back into the subsurface. So production and injections of fluid into the subsurface. Now, if you inject fluid into the subsurface, this changes the mechanical, thermal, hydraulical, chemical state at depth. And this sets off a range of processes. So fluid flow, heat transfer, rock deformation, chemical reactions, deformation of fractures, even earthquakes. All these processes also interact. So this makes it an extremely challenging system to understand and a wonderful task for an applied mathematician to embark on. Now, in Iceland, they also want to get more out of this system. So in 2017, they drilled a well down to 4,500 meters, reaching pressures of more than 340 bars and temperatures of more than 500 degrees. In this situation, the fluid, formation fluid, is supercritical. So it behaves it has some properties of liquid and some properties of gas, behaving somehow in between. So even more challenging. If this could be realized, you could produce 5 to 10-fold of from a geothermal well compared to what you do today. So we want to model this, we want to understand what is going on. And to do that, we need to model this interaction between the processes in the subsurface and the structure of the subsurface, which is really important to define these processes. So we need to represent the structure, we need to represent the processes, and the tricky part is to be able to handle the interaction, because the processes, not only do they all interact, but they affect the structure of the formation, because they are very much influenced by fractures in the formations, and because of the processes, these fractures deform, they open, etc. So there is an interaction there that is difficult to grasp. So I thought I would say a little bit about how we deal with structure and how we deal with the processes. So for the structure, so the subsurface is highly heterogeneous, and it has fractures, faults, sort of discontinuities, like a mathematician would call it. And I illustrate that by a picture I took in May on the flight from Bergen to Oslo. So this is Hardanger. And you can see how the melting snow traces out discontinuities in the surface. And these type of discontinuities, fractures, faults, they extend to depth, and they exist on all scales. So the structure of the subsurface can be very complex. And this we need to represent. So we develop simple models. We call them mixed dimensional models. We represent fractures as objects, so one dimension lower than the rest of the domain, so surfaces in 3D, so forth. So this is one part. And then we need to represent the coupled processes. So we do that by systems of equations, so you can have a quick glimpse what that could look like. This goes into a model development cycle. So we have our observation, we have a conceptual understanding of the physics that go on, then we use physical constitutive laws, we develop our mathematical models, we make discretization methods to be able to write code so that we can simulate what is going on. So the mathematics helps us then to grasp these processes that otherwise would have been impossible to understand, because you cannot really identify any sort of simple causality when it comes to these systems. Now, this is a huge task, and thanks to the ERC, I have a really great team to work with me on this. And I wanted to just show a photo of these people here. So this is an extremely talented group of people. Some of them right here. That's really nice. And I would like to emphasize that, well, some of them were part of my team already when I got the ERC project, and some were hired later. And in particular, the ERC project made it possible to hire researchers, because the software and code we're developing, it requires extremely high level of skill to be able to develop that. So it's really nice in the project that we can have a mix between, yes, younger PhD students, postdocs, but also these more experienced researchers that are really top in developing code. So that was the first part of the talk. And then next, how has the ERC impacted my career trajectory? Well, I will try to be quick. I think the ERC project was an invitation to develop my research agenda. And I think it's important to look at it like that, because many who apply for an ERC will not get it, but it's an extremely, the process has very little bureaucracy to it, so the time you spend on the application is really the time you spend on developing ideas, maybe discussing with colleagues, doing things that are useful in a long-term perspective if you want a career in science. So, and of course then, if you get the grant, you can fully commit to this agenda. So, for me, I think earlier my career looked a bit, I like knitting, so I showed this picture, it was lots of loose ends. Now, with the ERC project and other projects, I have been able more to find a golden thread. Of course, I think this is something all of you know. The project gives really the opportunity to pursue long-term ambitions. And when I think about my scientific career, it's not in 5 years. I mean, I will stay in science probably till I'm 70, right? So long-term is, I don't know, at least 10 years. This is how I think about it. I got the ERC grant. I also got funding for a research center. So my focus has shifted more towards research leadership. So I would say an extremely important part of my work is to have this group of people thrive and to enjoy what they do and build a good environment. I also would like to emphasize that the University of Bergen has been extremely generous to the ERC grantees, also providing additional funding that is very flexible, and that we can use also to develop new ideas that are sort of coming out of the project. And one example is that we recently started to look into is to model co-production of geothermal energy and lithium. So lithium is a scarce resource, especially in Europe. We need 12 times as more lithium in 2030 as we did in 2020. So this is, and we realized that the mathematical models that we have been developing in the projects, they are also can also be extremely they are extremely versatile. So this is the nice thing about mathematics, and we can also use them to model this type of geochemical interactions that are important in the geothermal lithium systems. So this is one example, and a nice thing about this example was that after I made this talk and sent it off yesterday, I was informed that we actually now have funding for a project to do this. So that was nice. Also, I think the project has given me a larger network, improved visibility, and I see I am out of time, so I will be quick. It has given me a career opportunity where I'm located. I think for other researchers in Europe, the ERC projects are extremely important because it gives them an opportunity of a career where they want to go. So I want to emphasize that. So these people are important to me. For me, it was no opportunity, at least it has not been for the last years, to move out of Bergen. So that's good with the ERC project. It also, because I got the ERC and the research center, I had to make a time budget. That was a good thing for me to do, to make some priorities, because I realized that I had to be deliberate in terms of what not to do. So I made a plan for that, and that was good. Because I have to say, for some, and I will end with that, I mean, for some scientists, they get all the happiness and energy that they need from the science that they're doing. And I think this is true for some of the really, really top scientists in the world. For me, it's not the case. I also need something on the outside. So I will just end there that, yes, work-life balance, this is also important to me. And I think that the long-term perspective of the ERC project made it possible to me to make a budget for my time, to make some priorities, think long-term, think what can I do today to get energy, to do what I need, not just tomorrow, but the next 10 years. 20 years. So thank you for your attention. That was it.
Thank you, Inge. Our next guest is Professor of Experimental Immunology at Oslo University Hospital. Here to share her project, Outsource, please welcome Professor Johanna Olweus.
So thank you, and many thanks to the University of Bergen for inviting me to present my ERC Consolidated Grant project. It's really a great honor and pleasure to show our work at the university where I studied medicine. I got my PhD degree, and also in the city where I grew up. So the title of my project is Outsource, referring to the idea of using healthy donor immune cells, so-called T cells, to attack cancer in cancer immunotherapy, hence outsourcing cancer immunity to healthy donors. So, what do T cells do? T cells are essential for curing us from infections. Most of us have had COVID-19, and antibodies we know can neutralize virus, preventing infection and great virus spreads. But T cells are the ones that can cure us once our cells get virally infected. And they can do that by recognizing the virally infected cells via their T cell receptor. They recognize them as 1, foreign, and 2, dangerous, and this can lead to killing of the target cells that is so precise that I like to compare it to single-cell surgery. So T cells can also recognize cancer, but in a patient who has widespread cancer, we all know that the T cells have lost the battle. They tolerate cancer. So how can we overcome this? In a therapy called CAR-19 T cell therapy, T cells are harvested from the blood of patients, and then they are genetically engineered in the laboratory to be equipped with an artificial immune receptor that can recognize cell surface proteins on B cells. And these proteins are unique to the B cells. These genetically engineered T cells can then kill B-cell leukemia and B-cell lymphoma once the cells are sent back into the bloodstream of the patient. So the first patient who was receiving this therapy was Emily Whitehead, and she's now 12 years cancer-free. And since then, 35,000 patients worldwide have been treated with CAR-19 T-cell therapy. But this very successful therapy does not benefit 60% of the patients who are treated, and no CAR T-cell therapy has yet been approved for patients with other leukemia types or with solid cancers. So why is that? CAR T-cells can only recognize cell surface proteins on the cancer cells, and it has proven very difficult to identify cell surface proteins that can be safely targeted on non-B-cell cancers. So this is where T-cell receptors can provide an opportunity, because T-cell receptors can recognize not only cell surface proteins, but also targets that are inside the cancer cells. And how do they do that? Well, all our old proteins, they go through continuous degradation in the cell's garbage disposal, and they're shown as protein fragments on the cell surface in complex with so-called tissue-type molecules. So this means that therapeutic use of T-cell receptors could dramatically increase the number of potential therapeutic targets, because 80% of our cellular proteins are inside the cell. So where can we find therapeutic T-cell receptors? Most researchers, this is a field in its infancy, so most researchers have so far exploited patient T cells to this end. But there are a number of limitations to using patient T cells for identification of therapeutic T cell receptors. One being that the patient immune responses are usually insufficient. The patients usually relapse from their cancers. The second being that it is limited how many T cells you can harvest from a heavily pretreated patient who has gotten a lot of chemotherapy. Healthy donor T cells are not limited by these issues. So we developed technology to be able to identify therapeutic T cell receptors from healthy donor T cells. And we demonstrated that by using this technology, we could identify T cell receptors that could recognize up to 5-fold more DNA mutations as compared with the T cell receptors from the patients. And I will now show you just 2 examples of T cell receptors that we have identified using this technology within the outsource project. And the first is a T cell receptor that recognizes a particular DNA mutation that is shared between a subgroup of patients with acute myeloid leukemia. And we could demonstrate that T cells engineered with this T cell receptor could eliminate acute myeloid leukemia that was transplanted to mice in 4 different mouse models that each represent a different clinical situation. This mutation creates a survival advantage for the cancer cells, so it's particularly important to target it. A second example is a T cell receptor recognizing a novel target that we have identified called TDT, which is present in T cell and B cell lymphoblastic leukemia. And also this TCR, when engineered into T cells, can efficiently eliminate leukemia in multiple mouse models. So we now have advanced plans for an academic phase 1, first in human clinical trial, including patients with T cell and B cell leukemia. And to this end, we have generated a protocol for how to manufacture gene-modified immune cells. And the clinical team is led by Dr. Jochen Büchner at Oslo University Hospital, who is also part of the clinical team that got FDA and EMA approval for ALL patients to be treated with CAR-19 T-cell therapy. In 2023, I also got an ERC proof of concept grant to explore the potential for this therapy commercially. And To enable future gene or manufacturing of gene-modified cells in Norway, I took the initiative to the establishment of a new National Center for Advanced Cell and Gene Therapy that opened 2021 at Oslo University Hospital. And this was made possible thanks to a generous private donation by the donor consortium that is shown here. So, how has ERC influenced on my career? I would like to highlight two major opportunities that have come my way, much thanks to results that I've generated through my ERC project. And the first is a national opportunity, as my group is a partnering group on a new Center of Excellence that has been funded by the Research Council of Norway, starting 2023 and funded for 10 years, and where I am one of two directors for a center called PRIMA. This is an acronym for Precision Immunotherapy Alliance. And we will address two major challenges in cancer immunotherapy, one being the lack of efficacious receptors and safe targets in cancer immunotherapy, the second being that tumor cells are excellent at escaping the immune system. The second opportunity is that my group has become a partnering group on a new consortium that started in 2024, funded by the Cancer Research UK and NIH in an effort called Cancer Grant Challenges. So the background for this Cancer Grant Challenge is that the speed with which therapeutic targets and matching T-cell receptors are discovered is slow today. We want to speed this up. And in fact, we do not know what the majority of tumor-reactive T-cells in successful therapies like immune checkpoint inhibition, what they actually recognize and see in the cancer. So the grand challenge is then, can we crack the T-cell receptor cancer recognition code? And the ultimate goal of this consortium is then, if we, from a T-cell receptor sequence, using a massive amount of data to train, AI, of course, can recognize or can identify and predict what this T-cell receptor is recognizing, or vice versa. And this could have huge potential implications in cancer immunotherapy, because we could then identify which immunotherapy would be good for which patient, and we could also design de novo immunotherapies based on T-cell receptors. And the name of this consortium is Matchmakers, and you will find the name of these partners at the bottom of the slide. So with that, I will just thank my highly dedicated and enthusiastic team in Oslo, of course, our excellent collaborators nationally and internationally, and also our funders. And last, but of course not least today, the ERC for this wonderful, wonderful opportunity. And like the former speaker, I would also say that this is where I find inspiration for my next projects. It's in Norwegian nature, together with family. So thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Johanna. Our next speaker is Research Professor in Social Anthropology at the Christian Michelsen Institute here in Bergen. Here to share her ERC project, Transocean, please welcome Professor Adita Rosco.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you to the University Rector, Professor Margaret Hagen, for this invitation. It is a honor and pleasure to be here. The title for my presentation is a reflection, or rather realization, which coming from my ERC starting grant, which is about to finish, and my ERC consolidator grant, which is about to start, that First Nation indigenous people are often thought about having culture, but rarely thought about having history, and particularly global history. So let me start with my first ERC project, Transoceanic Fishers, Multiple Mobilities in and out of the South China Sea, which show how ethnographic data theoretization that uses synthesizing comparison can advance global cross-cultural understanding in the specific field. And the specific field is transnational fisheries crime. So the main objective of this project was to advance understanding and theorize how actually fishers move in and out of categories of fisher, poacher, trader, smuggler, and sometimes maritime militia. And to explore that, we look at globalizing Chinese and Vietnamese fishing fleets in the context of the South China Sea territorial dispute between China and several ASEAN countries, which pushed these fishers as far as Africa and Oceania. To do that, we have to trace particular historical trajectories in certain fishing communities and also look at shifting occupational patterns in past generations. So the international team composed of Dr. Xuefei Shi, Dr. Han Zhou, and Dr. Lucas Watt, some of them they are here, so you can meet them in live, explore, map, and connected those fishers across 4 big sub-projects in Africa and in Oceania. So one of the findings, among many, was what we found, especially in the context of Chinese and Vietnamese fishermen, that there is a continuity between imperial and modern states' attempts to valorize fishers' skills and knowledge in pursuit of their larger geopolitical and economic agendas. And that fit together with fishers' own abilities to exploit new conditions through occupational slippage, which is basically the historically acquired ensskilledments that allowed them in the past to shift between different maritime livelihoods, whether that was piloting of ships, piracy, or smuggling, or other activities, historically built cosmopolitan and ethnic networks and historical patterns of mobility. So what we found that, what actually opposed to that's what policymakers are saying, fishers are not only instruments in the agendas, political agendas of their states, but they are also drivers of territorial enclosures in their own terms, and they capitalize on historical patterns of mobility. So while the lax regulation, corruption, structural poverty, and overcapacity are important factors, they don't explain entirely the phenomenon. Just to give you an example, one small example is that, for example, particular communities in the South China Sea were selected in the past by imperial court and operated in the Royal Navy. Today, the same communities are part of maritime militia and subsidized as a fishing fleets. In the 18th, 19th century, they paid tax, for example, in turtle shells or other marine goods collected in the specific parts of the sea. Today, they might be engaged in illicit harvesting, what is today considered illicit, of luxury marine goods in the same parts of the sea. They were sedentarized in the past, acquire new identities, obtain land through military service. Today, they might receive subsidies for building steel-hulled trawlers, fuel, fishing trips to the disputed areas. So this is to just give you the one example, but I want to talk about the breakthrough important which came out during the course of this project, was the discovery of ancient Champa freshwater wells and a collection of the 18th and 19th century temple documents referring to historical and multi-ethnic migration in the South China Sea. For those who don't know, Champa was a collection of independent Cham polities that extended across the coast of what is now present-day central and southern Vietnam from the Second Common Era to the mid-19th century. So Cham people are something like Sami people for Norway. So these Cham freshwater wells are still used by contemporary inhabitants. They are rebuilt, innovated, and reused. And that discovery put my research on new trajectory to explore Austronesian speakers' connectivity via coastal aquifers. And that will be explored in the next ERC consolidator grant next year, which combines anthropology, archaeology, and geohydrology. And the phenomenon we want to look at is, for thousands of years, people have settled on remote islands lacking perennial surface water, such as lakes, rivers, and streams. So where did they get water from? They relied for survival on fresh water that surfaces from underground aquifers where land meets sea. In geology or geohydrology, it's called submarine water discharge. So in this project, I will be studying how aquifers, underground layers of permeable rock that contains fresh water, have been crucial for mariners in Indo-Pacific region, and how indigenous knowledge that secure continued access to these freshwater sources has made mobility and large-scale migration possible even in times of changing sea level. So the question we want to explore, how human occupation connects to the sea level. And by asking this question, the project looks towards the future as much as it looks back in time. Indigenous knowledge accumulated over time has been passed down through generations and traveled between different groups of people and different places. It didn't simply evolve over time, but arose as a necessity and outcome of mid-Holocene climatic and sea level changes. Today, when the sea level rises, this knowledge can help tackling groundwater depletion and build more sustainable water policies. So that's about the projects and the new exciting trajectories which are still to come. But I was also asked how the ERC influenced my career, and I will be very brief. There is no doubt that European Research Council is one of the best initiatives in Europe when it comes to academia. And it's no doubt that ERC grants are an important milestone in my career and offered amazing collaborations with high-profile prosecutors, lawyers, well-known scholars. But I'm not going to drop names and brag about all these collaborations, invitations you get during the course of the project. What I want to say today is that ERC is not a silver bullet. You still might hear that you need to prove your academic qualification. You still might face a subtle bias when it comes to where you come from or gender. You cannot rely on being prized or glorified by some and derided by others, as one of the advisory board says. Be torn in this or that directions. You can only succeed in the academic profession if you have a sense who you truly are at the core. You can only succeed if you know your strengths and your weaknesses, and by keeping your curiosity alive. Knowledge alone without curiosity will be like an empty shell, can't strive. Being twice a winner of ERC grant is an extraordinary honor and privilege. When I received my first ERC grant, I was a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Copenhagen, and it could be that I could end up without a tenure position. Here I am in Norway with the privilege of fulfilling work at Krishna Agarwal Institute, which recognizes foreign researchers' contributions as an asset to this country, Scandinavia, and Europe. Cultural diversity in research, teaching, and policy has to be priority if we want to ensure multidimensional perspective in the position of influence. I want to thank to the European Research Council, the University of Bergen, and particularly to my institute, Krishna Agarwal, for the supporting me over the years, supporting my grant, and being a wonderful host institution. I hope we can have more occasions to celebrate diversity across so many important academic sectors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adita. Our next guest is Head of Research at the Division of Radiology and Nuclear Medicine at Oslo University Hospital. Here to introduce his ERC project, IMPRESS, please welcome Professor Kureg Emblem.
Thank you for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to present my project as an ERC starting grant from 2017. So really now I'm on the tail end of that project, and it was called IMPRESS. So when I present this project, I like to start with a quote by a commentary and that really sort of pinpoints the focus of my work, and that's physical forces in cancer. And sort of the quote goes that if you don't take into account physical forces in cancer, it's like trying to write a story with only half of the letters of the alphabet. It is an important aspect that's somewhat overlooked in clinical cancer therapy. And sort of in more detail, I think we all can relate to if you try to water your plants in your garden and there's a bend in that hose, you can't really water your plants. And this is actually more or less the case for cancer as well. So in a growing cancer in the body, there are mechanical forces that comes from the tumor that's growing, as well as sort of this surrounding tissue that's been modified by the cancer itself. And this turns into a hostile environment that really promotes hypoxia, which is not a good thing for the cancer because it also promotes tumor progression and metastatic behavior. And moreover, it really limits the ability to deliver blood-borne medicine to the tumor. So it doesn't really help if you have the best medicine in the world, but if it can't reach its target, it doesn't really do its job. And that's the focus of my study. So this was a clinical phase 2 study where we used a drug off-label to try and modulate the microenvironment of the tumor and use imaging to assess whether or not this was working or not. This is a study that was started in 2019. It's still in process because of COVID, among others, but it will be finished by the end of the year. So I can't really present any fancy data on it because it's in data lock. We're not allowed to share it. But what I can show is this. Along the way, in order to sort of answer the question as to whether this drug is working or not, we developed lots of cool imaging methods, one being this thing, which is MR elastography, and that's basically inducing mechanical forces in the body, in the brain for us, and you measure the wave propagations through the body to assess measures such as stiffness, viscosity, mechanical forces, and so on. And we use that during therapy to assess whether or not conventional cancer therapy is improved and its delivery in patients with brain cancer. So this is thanks to the team. We can do cool techniques like this. This has also been, because this was really not a technique available at the time in the hospital, it's also been adapted by other groups not doing our kind of research because they saw the potential. So it's used for other kind of neurodegenerative diseases as well outside of our work, which is kind of a cool byproduct. So changing gear, I'd like to talk about impact. I think sort of summing up, this probably is the most important thing for me. As a physicist by training, it's extremely valuable to be able to learn that your research makes a difference from someone. And this is a card that's on my desk. It's been on my desk for many years, and it's from a patient thanking the team for being able to be part of our research. And sort of when I'm a hospital manager during my daytime job, I'm in endless budget meetings. When I can think about this card and I know that research matters, it makes sense. That's why I do the job. So that's an important thing. On top of that, it made me, the project as such, really consolidated my research team. It made me introduce a whole new world of collaborators and partners, as well as members of the team, and basically a lot of new friends. And I also like to highlight the importance of bringing the next generation of researchers to the field. And sort of for me, as sort of a senior researcher, being able to attract these grants will also help leverage the next generation of researchers that do not, maybe not be in their position at the moment to sort of compete for these kinds of grants, but they will be the next time. So that's really the number one thing of attracting the next generation of scientists, as well as a lot of fun. During the discussion earlier today, there was a comment about culture. I think that's important. Again, I come from the hospital industry, the hospital's end, and really there wasn't in radiology a very solid foundation for academic research. It's all about patient management, budget, just driving this sort of endless workup of clinical practice. Bringing the ERC concept and academic knowledge into that environment really sort of reshaped how we think about science and what we can do with science in that environment. So there was a real culture change. This also includes outreach and being able to reach new patients for clinical studies, really changing the way we think about research. And this has also helped us attract and be partner of other grant opportunities from the Research Council and others. Moreover, along the same vein, this also made us visible to consortiums and networks on the international scene, be that cost networks, Marie Curie, so on. And that's really been sort of the stepping stone for the next level of research within my field. So this has been extremely important for me, as well as for the team, to be able to be part of that discussion on a higher level than just inside the hospital. So this has been definitely one of the big impacts of being visible from the ERC. This is an important point as as a computer scientist as well. And at the time of my ERC, I was part of the open science, the open data pilot of the ERC. And one of the goals was to really share data on all levels. So this is a major thing for us, to share both data coming out of the study as well as code and any kind of science that's related to the project and may be of use for other researchers as well. So we take in a lot of effort and focus on bringing that science into open data and making it available for others. So to end, what's next? Well, basically there's two sides to that. One being during the course of this project, there was a few changes in the field in terms of neuroscience, and one of them being the importance of neurofluids. And it turned out that that fit very well with what we were doing on an ERC project. So with that, we were able to move the project and leverage the project into also looking at neurodegenerative diseases and dementia and any form of brain pathology that involves neurofluids. And this led to a center, for a Jepsen Center, that was recently awarded this year, and this will be the focus of the research group for the years to come. Second, on your right, during the time of my ERC, there was really a revolution within medical imaging related to AI. And one of the things we were able to establish was a center or a unit in my department for doing AI research on radiology. And that's been quite a challenge. It's been very rewarding, and now we're getting up to speed on how to implement this again to make it useful for the patient, the end users. And I'm definitely one of those mathematicians who like to nerd out about AI, so I'm happy to do that if you're interested. But I think what we were able to bring forward with this momentum is really exciting, and that's something we look forward to continue doing. So to end, how the grant journey has influenced my career. Well, it's really a learning process, I have to admit. I guess in a way it made me into the researcher I am today. It was definitely a different person at the start. I would say it changed the culture in the way we do research. It made me more professional, and as well as it really made a new way of presenting your data to an audience that's outside your niche and your very focused objective. That I think is important, and really sort of the concept of your research in a broader perspective. So I think that's really something that's been valuable to me as well on a personal level. So with that, I'd like to thank the ERC for this opportunity and the Research Council, and thank you for your attention.
Thanks so much, Kire. Our next speaker is Professor of Ultrasound, Microwaves and Optics at the Department for Physics and Technology at the Arctic University of Norway in Tromsø. She's the recipient, she's also one of the researchers here today who's the recipient of more than one ERC. So she received an ERC starting grant and a proof of concept grant. Here to share her research with us, please welcome Professor Krishna Agarwal.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to stand here in front of all of you and to share a little bit of my science and my research and myself. At the risk of losing 1 minute of presentation, I would like to share my opinion about frontier research and why it is important. Why did we go to North Pole? Why did we go to South Pole? It was not to make a change. It was to prove to ourselves that we can challenge ourselves, that we can beat our own challenges, and that we can win. For me, frontier research is about validation, reaffirmation, and practicing the facts that we know about ourselves, that we can discover, that we can invent, that we can learn, that we can know. It's not so much about what knowledge we learn. It's about whether we can know, whether we can do the process, undergo it, whether we can challenge ourselves, and whether we can excel. So for me, that is frontiers research, and that is why it should be funded. Now I move on to my ERC starting grant. It's a pretty long, fancy name, so don't worry about reading it. Let's go straight to why we are doing it. Here, what you see is cell, bacteria, virus, and protein. Life that I experience as a person of height 1.5 meters actually unfolds at 100 nanometers and below. It unfolds at protein levels, bacteria, viruses, and so on. And therefore, it is important that we can peep into that window, that we can see what happens there in their living condition, not when it's frozen in time. This is a liver cell. It has nanopores. Its job is to function for filtering out viruses. What we don't see is that it has 100 nanometer pores to actually filter those viruses. When we do super resolution, this is what we get. We actually see each of these pores which are filtering the viruses. The only problem is that this has been done using a technique called fluorescence nanoscopy or fluorescence super resolution. It's toxic. We cannot image for a long time. There is a very complex protocol to do it, and it is sensitive to how your microscope is designed and aligned. So my vision, even before I applied for ERC, was we should be able to image cells and tissues in their living conditions, which means that we should be able to image them without labels or fluorescent dyes. How do I go about it? I looked for inspiration in nature, but I looked for raindrops under the streetlight. We can actually see these transparent water drops because the light is scattered by these. There is information about their shape and their size, which enables us to see them. These are transparent bodies, we can see them. And I got thinking, my first job was actually as a radar engineer. And we see radars in synthetic aperture radars on satellites. These are far, far away from the Earth, but still they can help us see every car, every tree, every building. I thought that this is actually very similar to a microscope. We are looking at cells from a very far distance, really many, many orders of distance away from their dimensions. Can we do something like synthetic aperture radar for optics? And it's not that it was not tried before, but people were really looking at the blurry picture that we can see from far. This is because they were looking at the linear response. I was curious if I can really probe into their small scale without actually going near them, whether I could model the physics, the bending of light, as it happens at water drops. And there have been many groundbreaking results, but I'm really proud to show this one, which allows us to be the light detectives, even without being there. This is the state-of-the-art result on the left, where we see a lot of artifacts around two solid beads that are present. These are two solid microspheres. And this is the state-of-the-art. Because we are looking from far, we have a very inaccurate picture of reality. But with this project, we have now shown that we can actually do this reconstruction or find these beads with more accuracy in terms of their morphology, in terms of their optical contrast, their size, without almost any artifacts and robust to misalignments. What was also discovered on the course of this journey, curiosity-driven, was that cells can be dynamic. And think of sperm cells. They really have to travel a long journey to fertilize an egg and become a baby, right? So these were really things that were moving around at a very fast pace, and I went back to my original inspiration of radars. Air traffic control radars are the ones that are always tracking moving bodies like aircrafts. I used inspiration from them and applied them on sperms without introducing any chemicals or any kind of perturbations in their system. And when we did this, we actually found that as compared to the regular sperm analysis on the top, we can identify all varieties of sperms based on their motion, as well as we can understand their consistency very clearly. This led to my ERC POC grant, and also other grants that have been successful regarding this innovation. So this is about my research, and now I talk about what it has done for me. My research story has changed. Initially, it was about electromagnetism, optical nanoscopy, and stuff. But soon, I started thinking beyond my narrow scope. I started thinking of collaborating with people who can bring complementarity. I am a part of this consortium, and this part of correlative nanoscopy is mine. But then I started thinking of building a consortium and leading this excellent science that we have been able to create for imaging organoids, so that we can have a better disease understanding, better therapy, and better modeling of life. This was another EU project granted in FET-Open RIA and now transferred to EIC Pathfinder. Now we are planning a Center of Excellence application due in 2025. We actually applied for one in 2021. I'm happy to say I was considered, it was ranked very nicely. I was considered too young, unfortunately, and therefore incapable of leading a Center of Excellence. I think this attitude needs a little bit change. I have now more gray hair, so probably the success rate will be better. But I am happy to say that ERC was the trigger for me so that my bigger story keeps evolving. And I see my ERC project as not as a project. I see this as a trigger for building an ecosystem where people like me, excellent researchers, can be identified, can be trained, and can be put on the platform to make a difference to the society. So this is my team. We are actually preparing for our Christmas dinner, but we are fighting it out on a game. So we really have a good time in Tromsø there. What it has done for my career. I actually came as a Marie Curie independent fellow, a postdoc, to Tromsø. In 2 years after I got my ERC, I was promoted to associate professorship. And in another 2 years, I became a full professor. Also, this vision of label-free nanoscopy, which was validated by ERC, allowed me to take this vision further and to propose more ideas so that we can do this better. I got a Free Pro Young Award from Research Council of Norway, the 3 million thematic multidisciplinary award from UIT, and the Organ Vision, the consortium that I built in EIC. I was also funded for innovations through Center of Digital Life Norway and the Research Council. And besides funding, I got a lot of visibility, and I hope I'm making a positive difference to the research community I am in. What happens next? On my own front, I'm applying for an EIC transition, an ERC synergy, an EIC Pathfinder, and the Center of Excellence. But I'm also glad to say that at least 2 members from my team are applying for ERC starting grant within the next 2 years. With this, I would like to thank this platform and greet all of you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Krishna. Our next speaker is Professor of Political Science and the Director of the Digital Social Science Core Facility here at the University of Bergen. She's actually running a conference on the other side of campus today, but she's come now to present to us her ERC-funded project Include. Please welcome to the stage Professor Elisabeth Evas Flaten.
Dear distinguished guests and colleagues, what an honor. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the ERC board, is that what you're called? The scientists that decide everything at the ERC. I just think that you are what the European research community can be at its very best. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. I'm very, very encouraged and very humbled by being one of these select few who have received this very prestigious grant that is the dream of a scientist that puts the ideas at the center. So broadly speaking, very broadly speaking, the Include project that I direct is about the following question. How are we going to live peacefully together as diverse societies? Now, it's one of the oldest questions facing mankind for as long as we have records of human life and activity. And you might think this is an important question, but don't we already know the answer to it? And isn't it this one? And I would tend, together with my colleagues, the other political scientists, to agree. Yeah, the answer to this question is liberal democracy. Okay, the question is important, but it's not new and it's not remotely original. And we already know the answer. So here the ERC must have made a huge mistake. Why would you give a grant to something like this? Now, the reason, I believe, is this book that I wrote with Paul Snyderman and that we worked with for more than 10 years, really. And that a number of people, some in this room, made a difference in providing funding for the Trond Mohn Foundation, the Research Council of Norway, the University of Bergen, small bits and pieces here and there, on either side of the Atlantic. And what we really make this point, or we start in this book by saying that such a thing as a finished liberal democracy that is a finished thing, that doesn't exist. And it probably never will exist. It can't exist, most likely. And so to be a liberal democracy is to be in a constant process of revision and development to become ever truer to the ideas and ideals of what it means to be a liberal democracy. And this process happens, among other things, as democracies face new challenges or encounter old challenges in new forms. And presently in Europe, questions about the inclusion of Muslim minorities is this incredible lens that we can use to discover or rediscover the strengths and the limitations of liberal democracies in contemporary Europe. So the focus in the Include project is on the readiness of non-Muslims to include Muslim minorities. And here's what is new in terms of scientific ideas. The aim is not to investigate the sources of strength, of exclusionism, of prejudice, of hostility, discrimination, which is very important. But it's been the center of scientific endeavor for very good reasons and for a very long time. But what we do instead is to try to identify the conditions under which citizens in Europe who are not Muslims are open to inclusion nevertheless. And this might sound like a clever play on words, like, not exclusion, but inclusion, etc. Something to do in order to say the same thing, but just the other way around. But it's actually not. It's a fundamentally different scientific undertaking. We shift scientific attention from, I'm going to need to have some water. We shift scientific attention from those who are intolerant, who would vote for the far right, who would be very exclusionary in a mindset, and turn the spotlight on those, and that's actually most people, who believe in and favor the ideals of liberal democracy, and minority inclusion among them these days. So let me give you examples of two discoveries that we've made in the Include project. One that is hopeful, I'll do that one first, and one that is a cause for concern, or so I believe. The hopeful discovery we published this January in the British Journal of Political Science. It examines the controversies that I'm sure you're well aware of over handshaking that European democracies that are experiencing and that they involve Muslims. Many Muslims, as you will also know, are happy to shake hands, but some observant Muslims believe it is wrong to touch members of the opposite sex who are not part of their family. So the question is how handshake refusals should be handled in a liberal democracy, and also at a university and at a school and at various kinds of situations. And abstractly formulated, if you're philosophical about it, this is really, really a difficult question. Because on the one hand, you have observant Muslims who really think it's wrong to touch by religious conviction. And then you have liberal, democratically minded citizens who believe it's wrong to treat women differently and worse. So, how are you going to deal with this? And the way we typically have dealt with it in liberal democracies, and the way we typically still deal with it, is to insist that the minority conforms. This is not a good idea. So, are there any ways out, anything that we could look for that could help us make this different? And let me just say that this is official policy in many, many, many European countries, is to insist on the handshake. So, our research suggested that for the tolerant, those who are open-minded, what matters is a notion of mutual respect. And so we thought, okay, if signaling respect is what is important, then maybe alternative gestures could be okay. And so we devised this controlled randomized trial where we had one set of people exposed to a situation where there was just a refusal to shake hands, and another set of people, a little bit simplified, exposed to a situation where there was an alternative gesture of respect, the one most frequently used, putting the hand on the heart. And it turns out that putting on the hand on the heart is an alternative that is acceptable and makes a huge difference to insistence on conformity. So basically, an alternative gesture of respect will reduce the insistence on conformity, and we see it again and again, different settings, different countries all over Europe, and the reduction is seen in these descending lines. And, as is the point, or one of the scientific insights driving this project, the results are driven by people who believe in culturally liberal values. How is that? Well, the people on the far right, the ones who don't care about inclusion, they don't respond. They insist on the handshake. But everybody else, from the left to the center right, they're open to this alternative gesture. So we have made a discovery, and we prudently, I want to show you, disseminated it to the Norwegian community, the German community, the EU community, etc., through these various policy briefs. And our recommendation is public authorities in Europe should not insist on handshaking. They should insist on a gesture signaling respect, but alternative gestures should be allowed. I want to draw your attention to one thing that is incredibly important for developing these ideas and for also disseminating them and communicating them. We had this collaboration with a Bergen-based Norwegian mentor program to prevent radicalization and extremism. It's a municipal level thing, but with sort of national significance. And this program educates civil society actors, social workers, educators, religious leaders, the police, many others, on how to intervene effectively in the face of concerns about radicalization. And early next year, we will publish a textbook in Norwegian for use in these mentor programs. And the results for the Include project will be an important part of this. Now, the second and more worrying result, I will have to be brief about, but I will get to it by just a small detour. Because the University of Bergen, with the help of the Trond Mohn Foundation, has made a huge investment in a research infrastructure. And this research infrastructure, the Norwegian Citizen Panel, has allowed us to develop a new method of doing survey-embedded experiments. It's called sequential factorial designs, which basically bring together discoveries and replication in a certain way of doing the design. And what we're finding through that, one of the things we're discovering are the limitations that exist in in acceptance of religious freedom. And basically what we're discovering is shocking. So while there is like an 80% almost society-wide acceptance of Muslims' religious freedom in European societies at large generally, if you're asking for acceptance of the religious freedom to preach conservative ideas that run against liberal values, that acceptance reduces to only 20%. And again, you'll recognize this, it's not the people on the far right that move, it's the people on the center and center left. So this is a kind of result that we're sending out and taking to the scientific community, because we don't think this is ready to, we don't have a ready-made recommendation here. What we're saying is, we need to work on this. This is a weakness of liberal democracy. We need to understand it much better and much more. So we're taking it around. We're also, of course, training the next generation to work on this. And this is a wonderful benefit of the ERC project. These are so talented people that we're able to recruit in it, and they're going to make a difference. And finally, they help us attract to Bergen, to this conference that I'm going back to, some of the best scholars in Europe to help us together work on these problems and how we're going to go forward. Because I don't at present know exactly what the next steps are going to be, but I know who I want to think about the next steps together with, and that's what the ERC helps us do. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for sharing that research with us. Our final guest speaker today is a professor at the Department for Energy and Process Engineering at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology in Trondheim. Here to share with us his ERC-funded project Watershed, please welcome Professor Simon Ellingson.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. It is an absolute honor, and what an opportunity as well. It's been an intense session, and which I thought it was going to be, so I'm going to give you something of a cartoon version of my project. It's not trivial. They wouldn't have funded it, I guess. but it might seem like it. So this is about me. I'm Simon, I'm a professor. I'm originally a theoretical physicist, but today I'm working, majority of my work is experimental. And I work on the flow in the upper part of the oceans, or rather, I work, yes, well, let's put it like that. And a number of other things. So to give you the big picture, to try and understand what will go on, or what goes on and what will go on with the Earth system, we are reliant on these big computer models that are run by supercomputers, and they're not perfect. Let me say this, they work okay, and they are certainly the best knowledge that we have, that we need to base decisions on, but they're not perfect, and for example, they mispredict, unless you correct for it, they mispredict the sea surface temperature quite a lot, by up to 4 degrees, which leads to errors in weather predictions and also climate models. One main suspect of what's wrong is that the effects of surface waves on the oceans is not included, or it's included in a very crude way. So the question is, how can we improve these models and try to make things better? Well, first we need to understand what's going on, because that is the real bottleneck. So we zoom in a bit more on the sea surface, and one of the most important processes that goes on is the transfer of gas and heat between ocean and atmosphere. That determines how much of the man-made CO2 is absorbed into the ocean, for example, and equally how well the oceans serve as a heat sink. Well, that depends on how the waters are stirred. So this is the cartoon. The ocean has a lot of different spoons where the waters are being stirred, and I'm researching one of those spoons, perhaps the missing one. The stirring is super important to other processes as well, like phytoplankton that produce more than half of our oxygen, much more than the rainforest. Which species are going to go deeper and get less sunlight, or higher when the when the temperature rises and the climate changes? We don't know yet. And of course, where does all the plastic go and how? We don't exactly know on a detailed level, but we need to know. So waves alone don't really do very much in terms of mixing, but they do once you put 3 factors together, waves and turbulence, and also currents. Once you have all these 3 components together, you set up motion, which is basically this big stirring spoon. And this is the project that I work on, is to put all these 3 together, because that has been the difficulty. You can consider 1 or 2 of them, but not all 3 together. So how do we do that? I like this transition, I'm going to do it again. We bring the ocean to the lab, that's our idea. Now, thanks to a generous donation from our university back in the day, the then rector, we managed to build this beautiful lab, which enables us to create well-controlled waves and the flow that mimics what we have in the upper ocean. So in cartoon form, this is what it happens. On the left, we have this special grid that designs the turbulence and designs the currents. Then we send waves on, and we can study in great detail how exactly this changes, and we have a controlled mini-ocean in a way. And we do lots more, but this is the main idea. And I'd say one end goal is to work with oceanographers, among them a group here at the Meteorological Institute office in Bergen, to try and take the trends that we discover and get them back into the ocean models and make sure they improve. And then something interesting happened, because I wrote my proposal together with my close colleague Jason, who wrote a starting grant proposal, and we said, we're going to both write about this lab, because, I mean, we won't both get it, that's ridiculous. And then we did, and he's also going to bring the ocean into the lab. and study a similar but complementary topic. And then after the initial we realized that this is an amazing opportunity to join forces and do what we couldn't do individually. So our projects now overlap, you might say, and the people who are in the middle are contributing really to both projects. And this is the strength, I think, on a type of funding that gives you some flexibility to change course according to the opportunities that arise. And we now see that the gas transfer aspect can be brought in, and vice versa, the waves aspect can be brought into Jason's project. And we've got a beautiful team going. So you'll see also that we have 6 postdocs. I'd like to say we are absolutely dependent on having postdocs in order to get this working, not just PhD students. We are hoping that this will be possible in the future. Depends a bit on some Norwegian changes in regulations, whether it will be realistic to risk it. We will see, hopefully. Now, I'll say a few things about the ERC and me, because I was kindly asked by Katie to do so. So my research agenda has totally changed because of all this. It's been rearranged. So luckily, you might say, this was exactly my dream topic, so that I was able to consolidate my big effort, which was earlier some disparate parts, into one solid block where the whole team works together. And this has helped tremendously in trying to think ahead and think a little bit bigger than what we did. And it's really cool as well, and important. So, I mean, what more can you ask? And to think over 5 years is absolutely necessary, because quality takes time, as they say. And I would say it's only really possible with this kind of blue sky funding, where you don't promise beforehand what you're going to find out. That's fine for some tasks, but if you want to make these kinds of questions, you don't know exactly before you try. I would also say I wouldn't have been given the grant if NTNU had not been so generous early on. You see, we had quite a lot of positions. Only 8 of them were funded directly by, or 7.5, by the ERC. The rest is primarily internal funding. And without it, I don't think our application would have been competitive, potentially. So this is really, really important. I'd like to recognize my university for that. So the recognition that you get putting an ERC logo on your slides is quite staggering. Everyone all of a sudden is interested. And sometimes I have to say, you know, I'm the same guy, you know. I told you this a year ago and you weren't interested. Well, it's not entirely true. But it is to a degree. It's a kind of badge that, in a way, it's whether it's deserved or not, you know, there's an element of luck in it as well. And lots of, as we've heard, lots of excellent proposals don't get funded. But I feel like it's done some good to my imposter syndrome. So looking ahead, I'm now able to think 5 to 10 years ahead rather than 1 to 3. It's much easier to keep momentum because all of a sudden I'm invited on board to various initiatives around the world. And I don't need to say yes to absolutely everything because I have a base. So that's good. You don't need to jump from one topic to the other, but you can steer where you're going because there are some things I'm good at, there's some things I don't know. It's better I use my time on what I'm good at. So I suppose that's what you call consolidation. So yeah, that's it. So this is, we have some early breakthroughs. It's only 1.5 years. I'm not going to tell you about the breakthrough, really, because it's not published yet. And it's serendipitous. But here's one really nice use of modern data techniques that 2 of my postdocs managed. We measure what's on the left, waves and turbulence in between, and then with some very nifty, it's not AI exactly, but it's a sibling, managed to make it into waves on the one hand and turbulence on the other. And that's a milestone. Okay, with that, I say thank you.
Thanks to all the ERC grantees, Inga, Johanna, Adita, Kureg, Krishna, Elisabeth, and Simon. It has been interesting, thought-provoking, engaging, and even moving. These presentations really give us cause for optimism for the future. And if we look at the very near future, you can look forward for lunch. The lunch will be served one floor down, and then you can take the opportunity to talk to the members of the ERC Council. They have an orange neckband, and you can also see them here on the screen. So thank you very much, and I think we can agree that ERC makes a difference. Thank you so much.